Hey guys, welcome back to the channel McNallie Money, the official home of power mining analysis. An awesome looking day in the markets for both Bitcoin and the Bitcoin miners. We're going to be covering that in addition to news from Bitzero, Soluna, IREN, and Luxor technology. Before we get into it, take a second, smash the like button guys. Big help to myself and the channel. Anthony absolutely loves it. If you're not already subscribed, McNallie Money, feel free to join and let us know in the comments section below what you thought of today's headlines and how you're feeling about this move in Bitcoin price. With that being said, let's get into today's video. All right, guys, Tuesday afternoon, a refreshing day in the markets. Bitcoin seems to have taken a turn to the upside here. We'll address that first and foremost. The miners following suit in a big way. Anthony, we've been talking about Bitcoin breaking down below that $90,000 support line. It appears this morning Bitcoin woke up and decided to head north.
Yeah, it did actually, and I'm not sure if it's anything to do with the president's remarks about a rate cut, but we'll take anything to get the Bitcoin price rallying after a few weeks of being in the doldrums. But good to see, and at the same time, we can see that the miner prices have equally been doing very well today as well. So, have a look at the heat map. You can see CleanSpark having a good day at 10% up there, Soluna 14%. The majority of the miners in the green there. And also, it's helped that 5-day change as well. So today's increase has pushed the 5-day change. However, if you look at the month change, we're still in the red for the majority of miners. That's a challenge. We did drop significantly from the all-time high, but we're playing a little bit of catch up. So, maybe a couple of more days like we've seen today, and we could remove that red from the 1 month position as well. Noticeably, the likes of Cipher, Wulf, and CleanSpark currently showing green across all the period changes there. So, in a time where we've seen the pullback on Bitcoin, there's still a number of miners there operating, positively throughout those periods. So, well done to those three.
Yeah, nice to see a bit of respite for the miners. We've been talking about this slow kind of red progression. Nice to see a boost of life. We're going to talk about some of the key stories here. We've also got a special feature from Luxor later in the program as they get involved in the HPC AI GPU space as well. But first and foremost, Bitzero. We actually had Kevin O'Leary on the program along with Mohammed, the CEO, last week. We talked about the fact that Bitzero is actually getting involved in the HPC AI spectrum as well. But that being said, they're not taking their foot off the Bitcoin mining pedal, so to speak. And similar to some of these other companies like Hive, Bitdeer come to mind that are aggressively growing their hash rate, Bitzero looking to get into that kind of mid-tier category.
Absolutely. This was a good update. And, like you say, we had a discussion last week with the CEO, and he talked about, the strategy of growing mining as well as high performance compute. Well, this growth is really to increase their mining capacity. So at the moment, in that region of Norway, they've got 40 megawatts of power available. This is going to increase to 110 megawatts. And it's going to take a little bit of time to do that. This is not going to happen overnight, but they expect to reach that 110 megawatts by September 2026. So about another 10 months to get to that point there, 9 or 10 months. And the great thing about this, it's going to be supplied entirely by hydroelectric energy, which is effectively going to nearly triple the site's power consumption. They're looking to achieve about 7 or grow by about to approximately 7 exahash, and that'll put them certainly up into that sort of group of peer miners there with significant growth available to them. Now, simultaneously, it will cut the mining costs that they're already paying out. Remember, they talked about the power cost there of around about 6 cents for the data centers. This increase in Norway itself will reduce their power cost down to under 4 cents a kilowatt hour. That's pretty much at the top of the lowest providers of power at the moment for across the public miners. We're seeing a lot of the miners in Texas achieving 4.2 cents for the likes of November. Sub 4 cents a kilowatt hour would certainly put you ahead of those And so if they can maintain that, then that's obviously great. But they've ordered all the long lead parts to get sent to Norway, and they'll have everything up and running by, I say, like September next year. So this is going to be a one to watch as we go forward. There, we'll be monitoring the progress of these reports in Norway, and we'll hopefully get Mohammed back on the podcast in the next quarter to explain any updates around this update itself today.
Yeah, the other component here, they've also listed on the FSE or Frankfurt Stock Exchange. So this one is currently listed on the CSE here in Canada. I know a number of people commented in the video asking if they were listed in the United States. Not at this point. They're actively working on that, but they now are listed over in your neck of the woods. Now, the next update we have, one of the more popular stocks we cover on the channel, IREN. We did a nice deep dive yesterday talking about the 4 big HPC AI deals we've seen so far. IREN obviously made the list. We'd encourage you guys to take a look at that video. It's full of data and insights. They've come out now today basically with a summary of their most recent convertible note offering, $2.3 billion. So you're right there, Anthony. They did upsize to the fullest amount, giving us a breakdown of exactly where that money's going.
So yeah, they took out 2 convertible notes. The first one in December 2024 for 440 million, and the second one they took out middle of 2025 for 550 million. At 3.25 and 3.5 percentage points on those 2 convertible notes there. So those are now being repaid with the proceeds that they've had from the selling of a placement of 39.7 million ordinary shares. Now those shares were sold at approximately just over $41. That would bring in about 1.6 billion of capital to help pay for that conversion. The 2.3 billion, as you've already highlighted, Bryce, that's going to have a capped call. The capped call itself is going to be about 201 million. So effectively, when you tot all this up here, the combined transactions, they raise net proceeds of approximately 2.27 billion. And also, if you look at what their current convertibles, the new convertibles at 0.25 and 1% respectively, that's significantly lower interest rates than the previous 2 there. So they've lowered their annualized cash coupons and extended the maturities on both of these convertible notes.
Yeah, really bullish move for IREN, extending the duration, lowering the interest amount. They entered a capped call transaction on these converts as well to limit dilution. And really, that's exactly what they're doing through repurchasing these existing notes early, is the attempt to limit dilution on existing shareholders. So we're a big fan of this. We've talked extensively about how expensive this CSP model is, and this really positions IREN in a favorable light. Now, Soluna Holdings, they came out with a doubleheader today, operational update and a mining update for the month of November. I got to say, Anthony, in terms of communication, clarity, transparency, Soluna really leading the miners, so to speak, this year. They gave a great update on each one of their projects, on how they're looking at the financing and, of course, the operational metrics.
They do, and they put out a significant amount of updates each month there, so they're very, very transparent. The CEO, John Belizaire, he also doesn't ask me anything, which is extremely unusual for a CEO. So basically, he's reached out to the retail shareholders saying, ask me any questions and I'll do a session once a month to respond to those. And he effectively does. It normally takes, a podcast of about an hour, and he'll go through all the questions, give the answers. We've interviewed him on many occasions and never had a question denied. Every question we've asked him, he's always been very transparent. Very similar to the fact that we've had a similar conversation with the likes of Patrick Fleury. The transparency shows through on a number of people that we interviewed there, and John's up there at the top. Now, in terms of their November operational update, remember the self-mining is a very, very small part of their business. We were fortunate, literally a month ago, to be at one of their sites at Silverton. They're the main site where Dorothy 1, Dorothy 2, and Grace will be positioned in the not too distant future to highlight the proof of concept in HPC. But in terms of their mining hash rate, self-mining hash rate at the site there is about 757 petahash for November. That's an actual increase of 3% on October. So we're starting to add maybe a few miners into their self-mining there. Nothing extreme, but they've said that that's not the direction they're going. The direction they're going is more in terms of high performance computing and also the hosting element. Now, the hosting hash rate, that grew from nearly 3.4 exahash to nearly 3.9 exahash. That's a 14% increase on the month. And we know, having been to the site, they've got a number of big name customers there, the likes of Bit Digital, the likes of Luxor, the likes of Compass Mining, and many others to name there. I think Cooler as well are also a recent addition to that list there. So a great number of clients there. They've obviously got a robust strategy in place there, which gives them a reasonably good margin. And remember, where they're located there, they're behind the meter in terms of being able to access a majority of their power month on month from the wind power providers in the local area. And we were lucky to meet a couple of those providers while we were in Silverton. So extremely good. Efficiency of the machines. They're not the most efficient fleet there. 26, that's probably mid-tier in terms of efficiency. They do sell the Bitcoin on a monthly basis, so they're not hodling any Bitcoin at the moment. Now, interestingly, they're able to mine a little bit more Bitcoin per day, even accounting for difficulty. So it looks like their uptime in terms of utilization was probably better in November than it was in previous months there. And if you look at Bitcoin mined per exahash, this is where it does highlight where the difficulty does actually impact a mining company. That was down 5%. Now, not down as much as some of the other miners, so able to probably eke a little bit more Bitcoin out of the machines that they had switched on over the whole month. Overall, another solid update. Keep your eye on that hosted hash rate. That's going to increase again as more and more machines arrive. And remember, Galaxy have their fleet from the Helios site, which is a substantial fleet. They're all going to be at Soluna sites, and I think they're already starting to arrive at the project Catty site there, where they're delivering 83 megawatts in phase one for hosted Bitcoin mining.
Yeah, some big name partners there. And when we were down at the site, we actually asked, is there a season that's more windy or not? It sounded like we're going into the windy season right now, so potentially that impacts the uptime or total operating time of the fleet. Now, they gave a great update on all their projects as well. I wanted to double click on Grace specifically. You can see they're in the advanced engineering stage. We've talked about this proof of concept quite a bit in the HPC AI world, Anthony. This is super expensive equipment. You're dealing with hyperscalers. I think whether or not these companies admit it, the hyperscalers want to see a proof of concept. Grace is going to be that for Soluna. I know we've seen a similar thing with the Wulf Den, with IREN, with Bitdeer over in Singapore. How important is it for companies to be able to prove that they can actually operate these clusters?
Yeah, it's extremely important, and they're going to have to show that to the market there. Remember, they're one of the smaller Bitcoin miners, but they do have a significant amount of pipeline of power available to them. So they're in a perfect position. Most of their sites are behind the meter at wind farms, and they're utilizing that power. Remember when we went through Texas, the amount of wind farms that weren't operating, because obviously if you can't use the power, then they tend to turn the machines off. So, having the likes of a customer like Soluna that can use it for Bitcoin mining and for HPC, that gives them a great opportunity. Now, to use that 2 megawatts is a small amount there. And that's similar to what as you've already mentioned, other companies have been doing very much the same there. That can lead on to bigger. Once you can prove you can deliver it at that level, then scaling it is going to be the next way forward there. And they've got a number of sites. Remember, Project Catty 2, which is the phase 2 part of that development, that is going to be set aside for probably AI potentially, or if the AI doesn't happen as quick as it can, maybe some more HPC hosting in there. But they have a number of other sites that will come online in the future to highlight the fact that they really want to grow their power, like every other miner, towards HPC, because they believe, like every other miner, that the predictable revenues, the reasonably good margins that other mining companies are achieving or will achieve once they start operating are far better than the fact that when you're dealing with an unknown in terms of the Bitcoin price. That's the real challenge. Today's a great day. We're all happy today with the Bitcoin price, but believe you me, the last 5 or 6 weeks have had a number of challenging days where you just got to sort of accept there is volatility there and wait for these green days like today, where you've seen a nice tick up from the market. Potentially tomorrow, the president might turn around and get the news he wants, another rate cut. I think they've got to announce by tomorrow afternoon. And so, no, that might even pump the Bitcoin price again. So a couple of good news items can turn it around, and that will help the likes of, these smaller miners like Soluna, who rely on every part of the margin they can achieve. But as I say, we were very impressed by going there, looking at the Dorothy 1, Dorothy 2, seeing the area where Project Grace is going to be built. And believe you me, they've got a good operation there at Silverton. And I'm sure that when Catty comes online in the near future, bear in mind, a lot of the facilities that are going to be hosting those miners from Galaxy are already being put up now as we speak, and miners are already starting to arrive in the racks as well. So that's going to happen very much in the first quarter of 2026, and that'll be some nice revenues coming back into the coffers for Soluna.
Quite a nice list or roster of projects there as you look down it. Now, speaking of hosting, equipment, hardware, we've got a feature for you here today. Luxor, they've actually just expanded or announced their expansion into the world of GPUs. This is in an attempt to support the clients or customers, predominantly miners that are transitioning into HPC AI. So we're going to cut out to a special segment, then we'll be back to finish up the regular podcast. All right, guys, so we mentioned there's some big news today in relation to Luxor Technology. We actually have a special guest, Ethan Vera, the COO or Chief Operating Officer, who gave us a few minutes of his time this morning to help walk us through the big announcement. So Ethan, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Good to be back.
Yeah, most definitely. Hey, we've had a number of your team members on. We talked about the derivatives. We talked about the energy trading board. Now you guys have come out with yet another announcement expanding into the GPU, HPC hardware side of things. So really getting involved in the GPU trading, similar to what you do on the ASIC side. We wanted you to maybe walk us through this announcement and then how this positions Luxor moving forward.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this move was prompted, I think, on a couple bases. First, like intellectually, we've been excited about this space for a long time. It's a fascinating space. I think a lot of your podcast guests have talked about it at length too. It's a very dynamic and fast-growing market. So wanted to just get involved personally. The second piece is we've been working with a lot of the Bitcoin miners over the past 4 years, helping them procure hardware and trade hardware. So we work with the majority of the large publicly listed companies in North America and globally. Basically, everything from pricing hardware, determining what's the ROI, payback period, etc., to getting them the best supply, going through their accounts payable, accounts receivable systems with them, and so on. And so we're bringing a lot of that expertise that we have in procurement just to another form of hardware for them. So these companies are expanding rapidly into HPC AI data centers, and we're in a good position to expand with them into that space.
Ethan, is it normal for these what we refer to as previously as Bitcoin mining companies, more like data center companies now, relying on sort of like partners with the procurement expertise, or do some of them still go direct to vendor?
Yeah, so I guess there's quite a few different paths in order for them to ultimately procure hardware that they can then run for HPC AI workloads. It somewhat depends too on their business model. Kind of the early business model we saw develop was more of like the neo cloud GPU as a service. And so first company example would be CoreWeave, then later Crusoe. Now you could say that companies like IREN and Hive that have their own cloud are kind of pursuing that model. These are companies that have some form of business of procuring their own GPUs, running them, and providing cloud services in essence to AI and other companies that consume the compute. Then you have kind of the more colocation model where maybe for longer term workloads, it's not economic for them to run on this type of service. And so rather those companies want to own or lease their own hardware, and they're partnering with Bitcoin miners as a way to get rack space and allocation of power. So depending on the business model, that'll change like how they view procuring the hardware, either for themselves or their partners. In terms of actually procuring, it's really the industry has moved from single GPU purchase to now an entire integrated system, right? A lot of the efficiencies of GPUs are not at the silicon level anymore. It's really about the entire system that's built across networking and the entire GPU build. And so they're looking to partners to be able to assist them in basically scoping out what their requirement is in terms of like the workloads they want to run and what's the best GPU build to get them there. As such, we've brought on different team members to help with this. The gentleman who's running this division for us came from 10 years working in industry across Dell and other places, and really providing that hands-on expertise is where Luxor and other players really are value add.
You mentioned two of the sort of like the prominent miners that are delivering HPC at the moment in terms of IREN and Hive Digital. We've just come back from a tour of Texas sites, and one of the things that came across during that tour from a number of the miners that we visited is that they're looking to sort of, even if they're going down the co-location route, they're still looking to maybe start a test and show model within their facilities to prove the concept that they can deliver it. Are you sort of like looking to aim at certainly those potential clients there to help them get off the ground in the first place?
Definitely, yeah. We're working with a couple of the large scale miners right now that are procuring GPUs on their own balance sheet. I think there's always going to be a GPU as a service and cloud style offering that's very valuable to the market. Just given that there's a lot of let's call it like batch demand, where demand for compute is only temporary in nature or it's sporadic, and that's always going to want to go to like a GPU as a service or cloud offering. A lot of those deals will be traded in what we think is going to be evolving spot markets for compute. So being able to go to a market and buy compute for, say, a 24 or a 1 month period. Some of that's going to be traded what we consider like over the counter, direct between an AI startup and direct between like the cloud provider, like some of these Bitcoin miners are becoming. So we think it's a great business model for a lot of folks, and Bitcoin miners, given their place in the industry, are very well positioned to capitalize on it.
Yeah, it's an exciting time. I remember our last interview when we talked about hardware, we said, hey, are you guys going to expand into GPUs? And lo and behold, here we are. I wanted to ask about the partnerships you've created. I know you just mentioned Dell. The press release lists a number of OEMs or original equipment manufacturers. You also talk about some financing opportunities. You're new to the space in terms of GPUs, but it looks like you've already got quite a few strong connections there.
Yeah, so it is quite a bit more complex than trading ASICs in the Bitcoin mining space that we're used to. Bitcoin mining ASICs, really, there's only a few different manufacturers. There's not really this network of preferred partners and distributors that has really kind of matured and developed in the GPU space. So navigating that has been a learning experience for a lot of us on our team, but one we think is crucial to getting this business right, which is partnering with folks like Dell and Supermicro and other of the key distributors as well to really deliver the best solutions. And I think you hit on an interesting point there, which is financing. In the Bitcoin mining space, ASIC financing historically hasn't been necessarily like a necessary part of the business. It's been kind of an additional value add service. Whereas in GPU trading, basically every single one of our buyers wants some form of financing offer as part of every single deal that comes across our desk. So it's important that we get it right. We were fortunate enough to be around the Bitcoin mining financing space in 21-22 when it blew up. And that fortunately taught us a lot of lessons of what not to do in the space. I think the key lessons there are that these computers really, they don't trade on a depreciation schedule of 5-10 years. They're trading based on the value of the compute that they can deliver. And that can be quite volatile, especially for, say, an unhedged Bitcoin miner that's taking directional like spot hash price risk. And so in 2022, we saw 80% drawdown in the price of ASICs over a 12-month period, from $100 a terahash to then 20. Any ASIC financing contract, which only had the machine as collateral, basically immediately went underwater, and those companies started defaulting on their financier. So there's definitely going to be elements of that's repeated, unfortunately, in the GPU space, and we're going to see a lot of these financiers make bad loans. But we're trying to also work with some of our financing partners to think through like what the collateral is here and plan for a downside case so that everyone's protected and the financing deals are set up in a strong way.
Now, one thing we found, Ethan, in sort of like the last 12 months, having discussed this with many of the CEOs of the mining companies that have pivoted towards a HPC strategy, is that gap in terms of what we have currently providing power towards AI and HPC in North America and what the real requirement is. And that number seems to be getting bigger and bigger. This must set you up for a great position in terms of Luxor itself, in terms of growth into this particular area. How do you see these next 3 or 4 years?
Yeah, I mean, I would echo a lot of that sentiment. Like we are seeing just like still outsized demand for what the supply is out there. I've said this quite a bit, but I think compute is going to be the biggest industry of our lifetime. Yeah. Spot compute, like power, just trading actual compute, I think is going to be bigger than industries like oil and gas over our lifetime. But also the hardware side is just a different scale, right, than what we've seen before. ASIC trading is on the order of like single-digit billions a year in terms of like machines trading hands. GPUs right now is in the hundreds of billions, probably in the trillions by the next decade. And we're going to see like an immense amount of secondary trading activity where the frontier LLMs and the leading models are basically using top of the line NVIDIA machines, let's call it GB300s or otherwise different Blackwells. Eventually, those GPUs are going to change hands to, let's call it like less performative users. So like folks that maybe goes to inferencing, and then eventually it goes to maybe even non-AI use cases like video rendering. Eventually, like we might be playing video games on a GB300 in 10 years from now, right? And so it'll continue to trade hands throughout the value chain. And there's going to be a ton of trading activity across all of those events. And so I think Luxor is well positioned to capitalize on this in terms of like GPU trading. But really, anybody in the space that enters is going to do well because the market is really just so big and it's growing at such a fast clip. So the best thing we could possibly do is just like be in the game.
We love to hear it. A rising tide lifts all ships. We just had Kevin O'Leary on the channel, and he actually said this is the largest CapEx investment of any industry ever. So really supporting those numbers you just talked about, Ethan. We're super excited for the team. I'll leave the link to the Luxor website in the video description below if you guys want to go in and check out their updated hardware page. If you have any additional questions for Ethan or team, feel free to leave them in the comment section below. Ethan, we appreciate you popping on here last minute. I'll give you a chance to close out. And again, congrats on the big news.
Yeah, I appreciate you guys having us. So yeah, if any people that are looking at HPC AI deployments or Bitcoin miners looking to expand into GPU, feel free to reach out to our desk. We have a big inventory list of both new and used GPUs. So looking forward to servicing the industry.
Excellent. We're looking forward to cheering you on from the sideline. With that being said, you guys, back to regular viewing. So not only are the Pubco Bitcoin miners transitioning rapidly into HPC AI, but it appears even the supporting staff, companies like Luxor, traditionally known for their dominance, expertise in the ASIC or Bitcoin mining worlds, now transitioning to meet this growing demand. Now, you mentioned rate cuts before the break there. Obviously, the Fed meeting wraps up tomorrow. We're expecting anywhere from 25 to 50 basis points. I just saw a clip come through, a 95% expectation on a 25 basis point cut. Trump also coming out stating that he's going to sign executive orders to actually block AI regulation in the States as well. So both of these, whether you're talking interest rates or less regulation, red tape, extremely favorable for the sector we're operating in.
Yeah, and you've got to understand where he's coming from here. I mean, really, by signing that executive order, preempting the AI regulations at state level with, more of a hands-off federal policy. You can't have 50 states controlling how AI is going to be, processed throughout the country. You need to have, rules in place. Absolutely, there needs to be governance in place, but you need to have an approval process that's not going to require 50 signatures every time something comes in to change, a policy or a direction. And having it at the highest level, is probably the best thing. I mean, it still has to probably go through a vote at the highest level anyway, but it gives more, access and governance at the right level, I believe. There, I mean, in the UK, we don't go down to county level, which is the equivalent of what you call the states. It's adopted at government level. There, they make the decisions, and that's what they're voted in for, to do that. And I'm assuming that's why Trump's doing this here. So I think it's a positive thing there going forward. People are using AI. AI is going to be the biggest thing ever. I mean, in terms of, we've looked at the internet, and we've looked at other technologies. AI is going to outplay all these other previous technologies that come into place there. So we're just at the very start. Most people are using AI every day without even realizing they're using AI. So that's where at the moment, once we really get adoption, it's effectively game over.
Certainly is, yeah. And really what I'm hearing is when agent to agent AI starts rather than people to AI agent, that's really going to be where things start to take off exponentially. So we'll just wait and watch that one. Trump does go on to say, in order to be the leader worldwide in AI, there can only be one rule book. They can't have 50 states making their own rules. Also stating that they're beating all countries. So we've heard this is a very competitive landscape in terms of AI dominance between China and the United States. It appears this is another attempt to keep that dominance. Now, the final point here, just on the rate cuts, I mentioned 95% earlier. Looks like we're going to get some sort of cut tomorrow. This has been another point that Trump has been very vocal or a big advocate of throughout the year. We'd love to hear your thoughts in the comment section below. Where do you think the rate cut will come in tomorrow? What do you think of the miner news, specifically IREN's use of funds, and of course the new Luxor launch today? So a great episode, Anthony. I'll pass it back to you for any closing thoughts, but as usual, a lot of information and a nice green day to carry on the week here.
Yeah, good day today. Let's hope it continues. And we'll have obviously a later show tomorrow, and probably get more of the day's information in there, with all the news updates that we can provide. And look forward to you supporting the channel as always.
Talk to you soon. Thanks so much, guys.